Nobody knew the barber was sleeping in the back room until his daughter found his shoes under the shampoo shelf. Sofia Alvarez had come to Afterlight Barbershop at 10:47 on a Thursday night, holding a folded envelope from LaGuardia Community College and a paper bag with 2 chicken empanadas she had bought from the corner bakery on Roosevelt Avenue. The front sign was already turned to closed, but the lights were still on, that tired yellow glow leaking through the glass while the rest of Jackson Heights sat under a cold blue rain. She used the spare key her father had given her years ago for emergencies, expecting to find him sweeping hair or counting cash at the front counter. Instead, she heard water running in the tiny bathroom behind the cutting stations. Then she saw the door to the back room was half open. First it looked like storage. Boxes of shampoo, old towels, a cracked mirror leaning against the wall. But then Sofia noticed a thin gray mattress folded behind the shelf, a blanket tucked so tightly it looked military, a toothbrush and a paper cup, and her father's black work shoes placed side by side like they were waiting for morning. Her hand went loose around the envelope. It slipped against her coat but did not fall. Mateo Alvarez stood behind her with a broom in one hand and a dustpan in the other. He was 47, but in that moment he looked much older, his shoulders curved inward, his barber apron still tied around his waist. Neither of them moved. Outside, the number 7 train passed above the avenue, shaking the window lightly in its frame. Sofia looked at the mattress again, then at the shoes, then at him. "Dad," she said, barely above a whisper, "do you live here?" Mateo opened his mouth, but no answer came. He looked past her at the back room, as if he could still hide it by standing still enough. The barber chair in the middle of the shop faced the mirror, empty and shining under the overhead light. Hair clippings lay in small dark curls across the floor. Sofia had come to show him her graduation invitation. Now she was staring at the place where her father had been sleeping like a secret. Before Mateo could speak, the rear door clicked. A man stepped in from the alley wearing a clean navy coat and carrying a leather folder. Victor Salcedo smiled like he had been expected. "She was going to find out eventually," he said. Mateo's fingers tightened around the broom. Sofia turned slowly toward the stranger with the key. Victor's key should not have worked. That was the first thought Sofia had, standing between the back room and the cutting stations while rain streaked down the front window. Her father had always told her that Afterlight Barbershop had only 2 keys, one for him, one for emergencies. But Victor Salcedo had entered from the alley like a man walking into a place he already owned. Mateo did not ask how he got in. That frightened Sofia more than anything. Her father only lowered the broom and said, "Not tonight, Victor." Victor looked at the folded mattress, the paper cup, the shoes, and then at Sofia with a soft kind of pity that felt rehearsed. "I told your father this arrangement could not last," he said. "A commercial space is not a bedroom." Sofia turned to Mateo. "What arrangement?" Mateo stared at the floor. 3 months earlier, he had still been renting a small room in Elmhurst above a grocery store that smelled of onions and laundry soap. It was not much, but it had a window, a hot plate, and enough space for a twin bed. When the landlord raised the rent by $400, Mateo told himself he would manage. Then 2 regular customers moved away. A chain salon opened 6 blocks down with bright screens and $10 coupons. The shop slowed. The rent did not. Mateo paid Sofia's school bill first, then the electric bill for the barbershop, then half of what he owed for the room. By the end of February, his suitcase was in the hallway. He had told Sofia he found a cheaper place closer to work. During video calls, he stood in front of the same blank wall near the supply shelf, smiling under bad lighting while she talked about exams, clinic hours, and graduation forms. He never turned the camera around. The first night he slept in the shop, he promised himself it would be for 7 days. He cleaned the floor twice, folded a barber cape under his head, and woke before sunrise to shower at a 24-hour gym on Northern Boulevard. 7 days became 3 weeks. 3 weeks became spring. His toothbrush stayed in the paper cup. His clean shirt hung behind the mirror. His mail started coming to the shop because he had nowhere else to send it. Sofia looked at the back room now and understood every missing detail at once. The late calls, the tired eyes, the way he always said he had already eaten. Victor opened his leather folder and placed a red notice on the counter. 14 days, he said calmly. After that, the locks change. Matteo looked at the paper but did not touch it. Sophia did. At the top, in heavy black letters, it read, Final Notice. Matteo did not tell Sophia that the first time Victor Salcedo came to Afterlight Barbershop with papers, he brought coffee and called him brother. It was a Monday morning in March, 2 weeks after Matteo lost his room in Elmhurst, when Victor walked through the front door wearing polished shoes and a navy overcoat that did not look touched by the rain. He looked around the shop with a smile that moved slowly, taking in the cracked mirror, the old barber chair, the faded price board, and the small jar of dollar bills near the register. You kept it alive, Victor said in Spanish. I always knew you would. Matteo had not seen him in almost 6 years. But in his memory, Victor was still the frightened young man from Guatemala who had slept on Matteo's floor in Queens in 2003, using a rolled jacket for a pillow. Back then, Victor had nothing but a plastic bag of clothes and a cousin who stopped answering the phone. Matteo had shared food with him, taught him how to hold clippers steady, even gave him his first winter coat. So when Victor returned speaking clean English and carrying himself like a businessman, Matteo felt something close to pride. One of us made it, he thought. Victor said he worked with leases now, helping immigrants keep their businesses when landlords raised rent or changed management. He said Matteo's problem was not money, it was paperwork. People like us lose things because we sign too late, Victor told him. Let me protect you before they push you out. Matteo wanted to believe him. He was tired. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. His back hurt from the floor. His English was good enough for customers, but legal sentences moved differently. They curled around him. They used words that looked simple until they were placed beside other words. Victor came back the next day with a document called a Temporary Business Protection Agreement. He tapped each line with a silver pen, explaining quickly, warmly, confidently. This only gives me permission to negotiate for you if you fall behind, he said. It keeps the landlord from throwing you out without warning. Matteo read what he could. He saw his shop name, his own name, the address on 37th Avenue. He saw Victor's finger covering part of one paragraph while he laughed about old times. Matteo signed because the man across from him knew the village where he was born. He signed because Victor once ate from his kitchen table. He signed because shame makes trust feel like shelter. Now, in the yellow light of the shop, with Sophia holding the final notice, Victor slid another paper from his folder and laid it beside the red one. Your father gave me authority to assume control after 60 days of unpaid obligations, he said. Sophia stared at the signature. Matteo did too. It was his name. Clean. Blue ink. Beneath a paragraph he finally understood too late. Then Victor reached into his coat pocket and placed a second backdoor key on the counter, as if he had owned the silence all along. After Victor left, the shop did not feel like Matteo's anymore. The second key stayed on the counter beside the red notice, small and silver under the yellow light, but it looked heavier than any tool in the room. Sophia did not cry. That made Matteo feel worse. She folded the final notice once, carefully, as if neat edges could keep her hands from shaking. Why did you let him talk for you? She asked. Matteo looked at the mirror instead of her face. In the reflection, he saw the back room door, the folded mattress, the paper cup, the lie he had been sleeping beside every night. Because I was tired, he said. Because I thought he remembered who I was. Sophia picked up the spare key Victor had placed on the counter. Then we changed the lock tonight. Matteo shook his head. If I do that, he will say I violated the agreement. He knows which words scare people. A car passed outside, throwing white light across the front window, and then leaving them in the dim again. Sophia wanted to argue, but the bell above the door gave a weak little sound. A woman stood outside in a wet gray coat, one hand pressed against the glass. The sign said closed. Matteo almost ignored her. Then she lifted her face, and he saw the kind of tiredness that did not come from one long day, but from many years of carrying things without saying their names. He unlocked the door. I am sorry, the woman said. I know you are closed. I just need a cut. Nothing special. Her name was Evelyn Park. She was 54, Korean-Canadian, visiting from Toronto because her mother had been moved into a nursing facility in Flushing after a fall. She had not seen her mother in 11 years. She sat in the barber chair and looked at herself in the mirror like she was trying to recognize a witness. My mother used to say, "Do not come to me looking like grief one," Evelyn said. Matteo placed the cape around her shoulders. Sophia sat near the window silent, still holding the notice. The first few minutes passed with only the soft sound of scissors. Then Evelyn's eyes shifted in the mirror. She saw the open backroom, the mattress, the shirt behind the shelf, the second toothbrush Matteo had forgotten to hide. She did not turn around. She only said, "My first winter in Canada. I slept in a hospital locker room between shifts. People think shame is loud. It is not. It is very organized." Matteo's scissors stopped. Sophia looked up. Evelyn pointed with her eyes toward the red notice on the counter. "That man," she said quietly, reading Victor's name. "He did something like this to my cousin in Mississauga." Matteo felt the room tighten around him. "You know Victor?" Evelyn met his eyes in the mirror. "I know what he does to people who are too embarrassed to ask for help." Evelyn did not leave after the haircut. Matteo brushed the loose hair from her shoulders, removed the cape, and waited for her to reach for her purse. Instead, she took out her phone and placed it face up on the counter beside Victor's notice. "My cousin's name is Daniel Park," she said. "He had a small print shop in Mississauga. Nothing fancy. Passport photos, business cards, church flyers. Victor told him he could help renegotiate his lease." Sophia moved closer, still holding the second key. Matteo wiped the scissors with a towel, though they were already clean. Evelyn scrolled through old messages, then turned the screen toward them. There was Victor's name. There were voice notes. There were transfers labeled consulting fee, emergency filing, landlord deposit. Daniel had paid him for 6 months. Then one morning the locks were changed, and Victor claimed Daniel had abandoned the business. "Daniel never fought it," Evelyn said. "He was ashamed. He said his English sounded small in rooms with lawyers." The shop went quiet except for the rain ticking against the glass. Matteo looked at the red notice again. 14 days suddenly felt shorter. Sophia asked, "Was my father the only one in New York?" Evelyn gave a tired smile with no warmth in it. "Men like Victor do not travel for one person." She made 3 calls from the barber chair. The first was to Daniel in Ontario. The second was to a woman in Newark who used to own a Vietnamese nail studio. The third was to an Ecuadorian baker in Corona who had lost his storefront after signing papers he thought were only temporary. Each person spoke briefly on speaker. No long speeches. No drama. Just small sentences that landed heavily in the room. "He said he was helping me. He told me court would ask about my papers. He said nobody would believe what I understood." Matteo stood behind the chair, one hand resting on the cracked leather. For months, he had believed the mattress in the back room was the lowest point of his life. Now he understood it was only the place where Victor expected his silence to end. Mrs. Nadira Rahman from the tailor shop next door knocked once and came in without waiting. She carried a manila envelope under her raincoat. "I have seen him before," she said. "Different faces. Same folder." Inside were copies of old mail, photographs of Victor meeting other shop owners, and one receipt from a cash payment Matteo had given Victor for rent. The amount was $2,000. The landlord record showed only 800 received. Sophia looked at her father. Matteo slowly sat in the barber chair, not as a worker, not as a man hiding, but as someone finally seeing the shape of the trap. Then Evelyn tapped the receipt with one finger and said, "If he stole your rent, he did not just take your money. He created the debt he is using to steal your shop." Sophia found the second key before Matteo found the courage to tell her the rest. It was taped behind the old price board, wrapped in blue painter's tape and marked with Victor's initials in black ink. She pulled it loose with 2 fingers and held it up in the yellow shop light. "How many keys does he have?" Matteo did not answer. Mrs. Rahman locked the front door and turned the blinds halfway down. Evelyn gathered the receipts into neat piles on the counter. Outside, Roosevelt Avenue was still wet, and the reflection of the train lights moved across the glass like something passing underwater. Sophia walked into the back room again. This time, she did not look at the mattress first. She looked at the cardboard box beneath it. Inside were old photographs, immigration forms, money order stubs, and a picture from 2003. Mateo was younger, thinner, standing in a cramped Queens apartment beside Victor Salcedo. Victor was asleep on the floor in the background, covered with Mateo's winter coat. Sophia held the photograph like it had weight. "You knew him that long?" Mateo sat on the edge of the barber chair. His hands were open on his knees. "He had nowhere to go," he said. "He came from the same department in Guatemala. Not my village exactly, but close enough that it felt like home." He told her about Port Authority on a February night, about finding Victor sitting near the buses with a plastic bag of clothes and no plan that reached morning. Mateo had brought him to his room, made rice and eggs, gave him the floor, then later taught him how to sweep a shop, wash towels, hold clippers, greet customers. "I thought if one of us stood up, he should pull the other one with him," Mateo said. Sophia looked at the mattress, then at the photograph. "And now he is taking your shop?" Mateo lifted his eyes. For the first time that night, shame did not bend his voice. "No," he said. "Now he is trying." Evelyn stopped sorting papers. Mrs. Ramon looked toward the front door. Sophia placed Victor's hidden key beside the receipts, the red notice, and the old photograph. The counter no longer looked like a place where men paid for haircuts. It looked like a witness table. Mateo stood, went to the front window and turned the sign around. Not to closed. To open. Sophia stared at him. "Dad, it is almost midnight." Mateo unlocked the door and looked out at the rain, the laundromat, the tailor shop, the dark windows above the avenue. "Then the people who know him are still awake," he said. "Tomorrow night, this barbershop does not close." By 9 the next night, Afterlight Barbershop looked closed from the street, but it was more alive than it had been in years. The blinds were lowered halfway. The yellow light stayed on. The barber chair sat in the center of the room with Victor's second key, the red notice, the rent receipt, and the old photograph placed on the seat like evidence waiting to be heard. Mateo stood behind the chair in a clean white shirt Sophia had ironed in the laundromat next door. He had not slept. Neither had she. Evelyn sat near the window with her phone face down on her knee. Mrs. Ramon stood by the counter, her measuring tape still around her neck. Daniel Park joined by video from Mississauga. The Ecuadorian baker from Corona arrived with flour still on his jacket. The Vietnamese woman from Newark came with a folder held tight against her chest. No one spoke much. People who have been ashamed for too long do not become loud all at once. At 11:38, Victor came through the rear door with 2 men carrying lock tools and a property representative in a gray suit. He stopped when he saw the room. His smile stayed, but only because he had practiced it. "This is unnecessary," Victor said. Mateo is confused. He has been living in a commercial space. That alone puts the lease at risk. Sophia stepped forward, but Mateo lifted one hand gently. He did not want his daughter to fight a battle he had hidden from her. Victor turned to the property representative. "I have authority to assume control. The agreement is signed." Mateo picked up the receipt from the chair. "I gave him $2,000 for rent," he said. "The landlord received $800. Victor laughed softly. Cash stories are easy to invent. Evelyn turned her phone over and pressed play. Victor's voice filled the shop, clear and calm, from an old message Daniel had saved. People like him never go to court. They would rather disappear than explain why they were behind. The room did not explode. That made it worse for Victor. Nobody shouted. Nobody moved. The silence held the words in place. Mrs. Ramon opened her folder and added 3 photographs to the chair. The Vietnamese woman placed bank transfer copies beside them. The Ecuadorian baker laid down a notice with Victor's name written in the corner. Sophia finally spoke, her voice low but steady. "My father slept in the back room because he was ashamed. You counted on that." Victor's face tightened. He looked at Mateo, no longer smiling. "You should have stayed quiet," he said. Mateo looked at the second key, then at the people standing in his shop after midnight. "I did," he answered. "That was the mistake." The property representative reached for the papers, but before he could read them, someone knocked on the front glass. An older attorney in a dark raincoat stood outside holding a sealed file marked with the original lease. Mateo opened the front door himself. The attorney stepped inside, closed his umbrella, and looked around the barbershop as if he had been there before, though nobody recognized him except the property representative, whose face changed the moment he saw the sealed file. "My name is Harold Whitcomb," the attorney said. "I handled the original lease for this space when my late father owned the building." Victor's expression hardened. "This is a private matter." Harold did not look at him. He placed the file on the counter, beside the receipts and photographs, and broke the seal with his thumb. The room seemed to lean toward the sound of paper. "It became my matter when Mississippi Park called and told me Mateo Alvarez was being removed without a formal review." Evelyn did not smile. She only folded her hands in her lap. Harold pulled out the original lease, yellowed at the corners, then a smaller envelope with careful handwriting across the front. Mateo knew the handwriting before he understood why. Eleanor Whitcomb, the old owner's wife. For a moment, the barbershop disappeared, and he was back in her apartment on 82nd Street, standing beside a hospital bed with a towel over his arm and his clippers in his hand. Eleanor had been too weak to come to the shop. Her husband had asked if Mateo could visit once. Mateo went every month after that and never charged them. He trimmed her hair slowly, let her choose the mirror angle, and pretended not to notice when her hands shook. She used to say, "A woman should still recognize herself, even when life is taking pieces away." Mateo never told anyone. It was not charity to him. It was work done with respect. Harold unfolded the letter and read quietly, but every word reached the back wall. "If Mateo Alvarez is still operating the barbershop in good faith, no transfer, assumption or secondary agreement shall remove him without direct notice, full accounting, and a hearing before ownership or legal counsel. He gave my wife dignity when she had very little left. I will not let this building take his away." No one moved. Victor stared at the paper as if the ink had betrayed him. The property representative took the lease, checked the attachment and lowered his voice. "The lock change is suspended." Victor snapped his folder shut. "That letter cannot override a signed agreement." Harold finally turned to him. "No, but it can force an accounting. And these receipts suggest that is exactly what you were trying to avoid." Sophia looked at her father, and for the first time since she had found the mattress, her face softened. Mateo's eyes stayed on the letter. The thing that saved him was not money, not power, not perfect English. It was a kindness he had never thought to use as proof. Mrs. Ramon reached for the front sign and turned it slowly from closed to open. The small neon buzzed against the rain. Victor stepped backward toward the rear door. But this time, everyone saw the key in his hand. Victor did not argue after Harold Whitcomb asked for the second key. He placed it on the counter slowly, between the old photograph and the letter from Eleanor Whitcomb, as if the little piece of metal had suddenly become too hot to hold. The property representative took the lock tools from the men at the rear door and told them to leave. Harold gathered the lease papers and said there would be a full accounting, a formal review, and no change of control until every payment, transfer, and signature was examined. Victor walked out through the front door this time. Nobody stopped him. Nobody needed to. The rain did what the room would not. It followed him into the street and swallowed the shine from his coat. For a long moment, no one inside Afterlight Barbershop spoke. Mateo stood beside the barber chair, looking at the letter that had saved him, while Sophia stood near the back room where the mattress still waited on the floor. Then she walked to it. Mateo followed her but stopped at the doorway. The room looked smaller with the truth inside it. A folded blanket, a paper cup, one clean shirt, a photograph of Sophia at 7 years old, missing one front tooth and holding a school certificate. Sophia picked up the photograph first. Not the blanket, not the shoes, the photograph. "You kept this here?" she asked. Mateo nodded. It made the room feel less like storage. Sophia pressed her lips together, then set the picture gently on the shelf. "You do not have to sleep on the floor anymore, Dad." He looked away because that sentence gave him more pain than Victor ever had. Over the next few weeks, the shop did not become rich. The mirrors were still cracked at the edges. The chair still groaned when it leaned back. Mateo still counted every dollar before paying rent. But the back room changed. Sophia brought a folding cot from a discount store in Queens. Evelyn mailed a small lamp from Toronto. Mrs. Ramon sewed curtains from leftover blue fabric. Harold connected Mateo with a community legal clinic. Daniel, Park sent a used coffee maker from Mississauga with a note that said, "For the people who stay awake too long." Mateo kept cutting hair. He kept sweeping the floor after closing, but he no longer hid the light under the back door. One night, a delivery driver from Nepal came in after midnight, rain on his jacket and exhaustion in his eyes. He did not ask for a haircut. He only looked at the chair and said, "Can I sit for 10 minutes?" Mateo looked toward the back room, then at Sophia's graduation invitation now taped beside the mirror. He turned the sign from closed to open and said, "10 minutes is free." The man sat down and the shop became quiet in the old way, but not lonely. Mateo had learned that a barber cannot repair every life that sits in his chair. He cannot give everyone a home, fix every paper, or erase the years people spend being afraid to ask for help. But sometimes a clean towel, a warm light, and a door left open one more night are enough to remind someone that they have not disappeared.